Hey folks, my name is Tony Mo. I'm a GM with about a year and a half's worth of weekly sessions under my belt, and I like to create conversation, discussion, guides, and just general yammering about my experiences as a GM, and then throw them up here on this channel where they can hopefully benefit, influence, or just generally motivate other GMs like myself in their own experience and GMing process. So today, I wanted to spend some time talking specifically about running a low-stakes campaign. I think there's a huge amount of value to be found for both the GM and the player in a lower-stakes campaign, especially over an extended period of time. And this was a discussion piece that I kind of had part of this blowing around in my head, and then the other part of it was thanks to Corn on the J-Cob over on Twitter, who reached out to me to say, hey, like the vids, can I suggest a video about keeping your players engaged in the beginning and the middle of campaigns? And especially at the beginning, how do you kind of hook newer players who are also, going through the learning processes of understanding how to play a TTRPG? And the more I thought about that topic and started, whipping together some ideas, I was like, hey, you know what's like a good practice, in my opinion, in general, is to not stress so much about having a grand epic arc that the players have to follow from beginning, middle, and end, and instead just giving your players a campaign that is all about pure, raw adventure. And those adventures can be many and filled with different bits of variety and diversity in terms of their design and their narrative, and they don't really have to have any concrete connection. So you don't have to worry so much about threading this like fantastic narrative that binds them all together as you lead to the final encounter where your heroes save the world. You don't have to do that. Like, it's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think, in my opinion, one of my favorite ways to learn a new system is to put my players, sort of through the gauntlet and let them progress very quickly so we can experience, in sort of quick chunks, massive portions of the game, especially across different levels and power scaling. But once that's done and I'm like comfortable with the system, I want to be able to take my time as a GM and develop encounters and, experiences for the players that really let them flex all of the little muscles that make up their characters. I mean, for example, I'm going to be starting campaign 2 in the Cyberpunk core rule set, this time in my own sci-fi fantasy setting, homebrew setting, that of course the players are going to help me grow and build over time. And I don't want to escalate things quickly. I want them to kind of stay, on the lower level for a while and get to experience all of the skills that they have as players that we didn't really get to mess with. The skill list in Cyberpunk Red is as meaty as it was in 2020. And so you can generally build like a detective character and spend a ton of time not doing combat related things, which I know is not always like the normal thing you hear, especially when you think like D&D or like a more modern D&D style system. It's like, 50% combat, 50% narrative. Obviously, some systems work better for some things than others, but there's just so much there to flex to use, right? And that's where I think a lower stakes campaign can come into play in a big way. It's going to give you a lot of breathing room as a GM. If you're a newer GM, I think there's a huge value to having that. You don't have to stress so much about, oh God, man, they're already like leaving this city. Where are they going next? Your players could spend like a good year's worth of weekly sessions just hanging out in one village, trying to uncover its mysteries, right? Or going from the village to the woods outside the village where there's apparently hidden treasure that leads them down another rabbit hole, right? That's the idea of a small stakes campaign, is that the players aren't out to save the world. They're out to just have a good time and maybe make a little gold and find some magic items along the way. To me, you never escalate an encounter beyond like saving a village in a small stakes campaign. Cities, that's too much. We're talking like 20,000 plus people. You're pushing it too far there. A village with maybe 1,000 people? Yeah, sure. Let's say that the start of your campaign is at this random tavern at this small village that they all stumbled into, just left their old lives behind, seeking adventure, and they find out that all these townspeople are going missing. Classic, right? They head out into the woods because the townsfolk are like, there's a hag out there. It's her. We know it. They befriend the hag. It turns out the hag's been cursed. She's been living in these woods for hundreds of years. She has nothing to do with it, but she likes you. And so she fills you in on a little secret. There's this cult activity she's been witnessing in the woods. They follow the trail. They find a cult underground. Eventually, they discover the cult is ran by some of the townsfolk. The very people who are supposed to protect the townsfolk are running this cult because they claim they're doing what's best for the village and keeping all the riffraff out. Very Hot Fuzz vibes going on here. The players overthrow these people and rescue the village, right? And then one of the villagers is like, hey, don't you know there's treasure out in them woods. You just got to find it. And they're back out in the woods again, looking for treasure that maybe leads them to the mountains, right? You're just stringing together adventure after adventure. And like I said earlier about the variety between these adventures, you get crazy. The players could spend a month investigating a murder mystery in a small city. Again, the whole city's not really at risk here. It's not about to be destroyed by a fucking great dragon. But they're in this city, which could be massive, and they're spending all of this time and all of its seedy underbellies trying to find out who this murderer is, where they've gone, and how they can stop them before they kill again. And maybe you jump from that into a heist mission, like just have fun, set up experiences that will let your players flex all of their different PC muscles, and don't stress about that larger narrative. That's not to say that you can't start threading one if you do so feel inclined. That is the good thing about running a small stakes campaign is you can always give little bits of breadcrumbs. Think about older TV shows like Star Trek The Next Generation, for example. Well, yes, there was always like a larger narrative arc that was being developed with Picard and Riker and the whole crew and Q. For the most part, most of those episodes are just like, we went to a fucking planet, there was some fruit, the fruit was being hunted by aliens. It turns out the fruit were like angels of the stars and we saved them and then they sent us back home. Like, you could just get crazy and have fun with it. And honestly, along the way, you're probably going to build up a ton of cool mythos for your world if you're doing something original, or if you're just coming up with original ideas in somebody else's setting, you're still going to be able to expand and come up with all this silly, wonderful stuff. And maybe at some point you'll decide, that's it, that person right there, that bad person who maybe got away in this adventure, they're going to be important later on, right? And you start to slowly whittle away at that thread in the background. And then maybe, a year from now, you finally escalate the campaign out of a low stakes thing and your players are suddenly on a brand new journey to save the world. I love low stakes stuff. I did it with my 5e campaign, which was one of my first homebrew settings going back years now. And I just adore it. It's fun. It feels more casual in a way for you as the GM. And again, if we're talking about new players, it's going to be relatively low stress for those players. They're not constantly having massive narrative arcs thrown at them. They're just concerned about find treasure, save person, stop murderer, break into the bank, just fun, classic, tropey adventurer stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. I think as a new GM, it's very easy to feel like you've got to do something new and fresh and beyond everything the players have experienced before. And I will leave you with this one last thought. When we talk small scale, we talk about doing sort of tropey stuff like this, remember just how much you probably enjoy the idea of experiencing some of your favorite tropes in a different setting or in a way you never got to before. That's what makes TTRPGs so great, is rather than sitting there and be like, man, I really wish someone would make another great heist video game. I'd love a brand new Thief that feels just proper immersive sim shit like the old days. You don't have to wait. You can run that campaign. You can run that Lord of the Rings style adventure for your players. You can run that more low stakes Monster Hunter experience for your players. That Monster of the Week thing where the players are just literally out dealing with a new monster. Maybe they're a bunch of Witcher style characters. Maybe it's more like Monster Hunter actually. Doesn't always have to be about the end of the fucking world. Sometimes it's just about getting a bit of gold to put some ale on the table next week and having some fun along the way. Don't forget that, and I think small stakes adventures and campaigns can be your friend. They can help you grow and learn as a GM, and they give your players a huge opportunity to learn about their characters, because you can dedicate entire little adventure arcs just to their characters and whatever backgrounds they might have came up with. And you never have to feel like it has to be pulled into this greater arc where now they're involved with the end of the world. It's just, hey, whatever happened to my best friend Dave, who used to live at that old village? Oh, turns out Dave's been missing for like 10 years. Oh, there's a little adventure where you go find Dave. we're just saving Dave, folks. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to leave your thoughts, comments, questions down in that comment section below. Take care of yourselves out there. Be awesome to one another. I'll see you around.